Welcome everybody to another Mindset Mastermind. And it's so interesting because it's a mindset mastermind and we're working on our mindset around money. And people are kind of dropping by the wayside, aren't they, Caesar? You know, it's one of those places where many people struggle is really believing that, first of all, money is unlimited. And we can get into that conversation down the road, that this is an unlimited source for you if you'll just tap into it and lean into it. And number two, figuring out what really to do with it when it comes in. So we're using a great conversation around profit first. Today's content is a wrap up of chapter 4, where we talked about, setting up our accounts after assessing the health of our business and seeing where the numbers really are. And then moving into, okay, here's what we're going to set up going forward with every dollar that comes in. For many of you, because you're in the real estate space, it's with every commission check that comes in. So I can't wait to hear what jumped off the page at you guys on chapter 5, as well as the recap of anything from your weekend activities over chapter 4. So get those cameras on, get those mics hot, and let me see who wants to get today started. Carrie, was that you?
No.
Well, she's going to mute her mic right now. Who else? All right, Josh, you got the floor, buddy.
It says, don't underpay, page 83. Don't underpay your most important employee. And it's interesting. A lot of us get into that where you're actually taking more from the business than you want to admit, because you're paying for this and paying for that. But you've got to make sure that you set up owner's comp. And I've gotten into that trap before. And you end up, when you end up digging into accounts or ending up digging into an area where you shouldn't, well, then you end up wasting and taking more than what you need. And so if you don't pay yourself an adequate salary, you're just stealing from yourself, essentially, is what you're doing.
Yeah, and how many people are actually doing that in the real estate space where they're not truly allocating and making sure that they're healthy and their business is healthy? Because it kind of flips either way. For a lot of businesses where they're selling widgets, you know what? There's not enough money for the owner. They're not allocating enough for them. Like you say, they're stealing from themselves. For many real estate teams, as they move into that team and building a quote business, they wind up stealing from themselves. I love the example in the book where he was interviewing someone and talking to him, and they had 3 employees doing all the work and he was starving. And he asked, well, what would happen if those 3 employees quit today? Well, I'd step in and do the work and get paid. Well, how about you just start there instead? So for many of you, you may be taking all the revenue in because you commingle your personal life and your business life, especially if you're new in this space. And therefore, you're not adequately funding the business. By setting up these systems the way they are written here, you will adequately fund both and have a plan going forward to tweak and adjust along the way. You got to know where you are to start and then set up a slight adjustment and then keep rolling forward. So what else you guys have? Caesar.
I'll go, Coach. Thanks. I just like the breakdown on page 68 of the revenue ranges as you start going up, the different allocations to profit, owner's comp, tax, and operating expenses to give you a guideline. Because he's like, it's not going to be exact, but it gives you a good guideline of where you should be. And this is based on, I guess, hundreds, if not thousands of businesses that he's dealt with. So it's not just a number that's coming from the year. And then secondly, when he refers to the part of taking 1% profit and then the next quarter taking 2% profit or 3% and then 5%, just going slowly and not just right off the bat taking like 20%. And he made the example of drawing 5 gallons of blood right off the bat, you would die. And so I like that analogy. That is just again a slow process to get you in the mode of um, getting into this mindset of profit first. So that's what I wanted to bring in. It was very helpful to have an understanding and see a forward goal.
Yeah, right on page 76. I loved how he laid out the 2 common problems, by the way, which go across everything in your life that you're either going to change or you're going to implement. And it's these 2 extremes. Number 1, don't get bogged down in the details. This is the kind of opposite of what Caesar's talking to you right now, because many entrepreneurs get trapped in the details, spending hours analyzing and reviewing and going through all the what ifs before they take action. And I love this. In fact, I wrote this down as a quote for some future content we're using. Perfectionism kills every dream. Notice it doesn't say some, it doesn't say most. Perfectionism kills every dream. Better to just start. Get into action. Now, the flip side of that is many people in this room that I'm looking at that I know and love, where it's like, damn the torpedoes. I have an idea. Let's just implement. Let's just start doing it. And sometimes that can make things go off the rails. And so again, the quote in here, I put success at risk when I go into a situation ill prepared. And in those cases where that happens, my ego blames the system when mistakes were simply due to the fact that I didn't put in the necessary preparation. I'm going to give you the perfect example of this in the real estate space. The agent who used to have a team, and then they say, oh my gosh, I am never going to hire agents again. I had to babysit. It was like herding cats. They never did what they said. All the story about them, rather than truly realizing they had never built the systems or even implemented them up front that would truly give everybody a path to success and a path to filling their financial model. Most of the time, by the way, in fact, I don't know of a single agent that I have talked to who has been in that situation that has implemented profit first while they were in that situation. They were winging the finances and magically all the money disappeared and they were working 60, 70, 80 hours a week slinging real estate to fund their team because they didn't set it up right. So those 2 extremes, getting bogged down in the details or damn the torpedoes, let's go. We need to have just a little bit of pause and shift to make ourselves successful when we have those natural tendencies. What else you guys have?
Just to add to that, Coach, he mentions I don't remember if he said 500 to 1 million, but definitely said from 1 million to 1 million is definitely where you have to have systems, because you can no longer have everything in your head. And definitely from 5 to 10, you implement having another team or some management to take over and almost remove yourself. I mean, obviously from 10 to 50, probably the same. But I wanted to add that as well, where he's like, you cannot survive or you can't even get into those ranges unless you implement those systems. So it's probably beneficial if we start implementing at the 0 to 250 so we can really take off.
Awesome. And yeah, those incremental changes. So who else? I'm looking at the chat as well. Beautiful. What else you guys have from content, Alicia?
I was just kind of wondering, like, when it talks about paying yourself, right? What should you pay yourself and paying yourself a fair wage when you are not, when you're kind of living from this one to the next deal, and you don't have very many deals in your pipeline. So while you're in that stage of the game, what do you do?
So I want to give you a couple of elements of grace in here. So you can implement. One, you're just getting going you may only have just a minimal amount to the company, making sure that you have enough set aside to pay all your expenses. So your office fees, your NAR, your, for you, Alabama State, your local, your MLS. You should still have a percentage of that gross revenue coming in on a commission check that you set aside to make sure those bills get paid. Otherwise, you're going to be out of business. And then you can take most the rest as owner's income. And by the way, part of that's got to be set aside to the taxes, because no matter what, the tax man's going to get his chunk of you. And then, just like it said in the book, 1% over to the profit account. If you got a $10,000 check today, you could put $100 in a profit account right out of the gate. Again, if you want to make it simple, and I bet you already have this done because you're on the EXP platform, you're setting 5% aside because of the agent equity program. So you should be signed up for that. You want to make it simple and easy, just sign up for the agent equity program, and that piece is already done for you, that you're taking 5% and setting it into retirement or into profit account. Okay. Number two, though, the other thing I want to say, if you're in that situation, you should be acting crazy. You should be a whirling dervish of activity, crushing your conversations all day, every day. Nothing else matters, because you've got to fill that funnel. You've got to get more stuff in the pipeline. And I would bet any of you that do not have the numbers you seek, if we analyzed how many conversations you had last week, each day, and totaled those up, and then divided by 40 hours, because you work a minimum of 40 hours a week as a full-time real estate agent, I'd expect you'd go, crap, I only had one conversation an hour, if that. This is about intense focus, high level of activity to get off of that treadmill. And by the way, it only takes 90 days. 90 days of intense craziness where everybody wonders what the heck is wrong with you will change the trajectory of your business permanently, as long as you still stay in some activity. Julianne, you're up. Then Mark, you're next.
Oh, hey, I have a question on this. This is the second time I've heard you mention that the 5% can be considered part of the profit. And I was the way, I don't know, it's my old way of thinking, but don't I do my investing with my owner's comp?
Well, you absolutely can.
Because like I wouldn't consider my 401k or my IRA, you know, and isn't it the same?
Slow down, because you're applying a label to this income that is inaccurate, because you're not on the platform. So the way the model is built, if you select to take 5% of every closing and put it to this agent equity program, it goes and buys EXP stock at a 10% discount. So you make 10% on your money the day you buy it, which, by the way, you could then sell it the same day and move it into a cash profit account. The key is that it automates off the top the 5%. And if you don't happen to move it that day, fine, it's just sitting there. And at some point down the road, you can move it to a profit account. The key is that something is happening to pull that off the top before you even see it. So now you're doing your life planning on 95% of that commission check rather than 100%. Make sense?
No, but that's okay. Because that's the financial.
I want to make sure it makes sense for everybody, and you're one of the folks. Let's say in your world that out of every monthly billing you run for your clients, that you only realize that you only saw 95% of that.
Right.
Would it really affect your bottom line life?
No, that's why I encourage people when I did financial planning to do the, to off the top, half of their raise always went into 401k. There are certain things that, you just automatically did with financial planning, but it was off of See, I'm confusing what profit is then with.
Well, and you're confusing someone's income as a JOB versus the business finances. So this is the separate business finances that you take 5% off the top ultimately is your first going. Might be 1% first quarter, 3% second quarter, 5% third quarter, that goes into a profit account that is two things. One, your profit, and two, your rainy day fund, in case anything goes wrong with the business. We have another COVID event and everybody locks up for 30 days, not doing anything. That will then give you the revenue to keep funding your owner's compensation out of that profit. That's why this profit account is so key. And remember, 5% looking at here was a 3-week coverage. The numbers when they're on what those look like. It's the same thing. Dave Ramsey on your personal revenue talks about having a 6-month reserve, a 6-month emergency fund. Ultimately, by the way, starts out at just $1,000 emergency fund, right?
Most
So
definitely.
over here on Profit First, it starts out as a 1% emergency fund. Think of it through that lens if that helps you, Julianne. It's a business emergency fund that when an emergency doesn't happen, it converts to profit. Does that make it easier? All right, I'll take half an odd. Mark, you're up.
So when I first got into business, I went to a business planning clinic and they said, the first thing you need to do is you need to get 3 accounts. And so we're all looking dumbfounded, like, because, we were in that boat where we were selling 6 homes a year. And we're like, so you want us to get 3 accounts with no money in it? And he said, yes. And the reason being is because you're going to run your business like a business. You need to have those accounts up and running. Eventually it would go to 5 accounts. But really what he started with, your first account is your business account. All your checks go into the business account first. And then from there, they go into a tax account or into your personal account. And then you can add a savings account, if you will. But the thought process was because most real estate agents aren't business owners, they were trying to teach us how to divide that money and get it out of the account so we wouldn't spend it, right? Because if it's in the account, most people will spend it. Now, I will say my bride is my accountant. She's gotten really good about dividing those within the account. We don't have as many accounts as far as like checking accounts and savings accounts, but they are divided. Like we have a business LLC account where all the monies go into first. And like Alicia was saying, like, I don't have a whole lot of money to pay myself yet, but still if that 10,000 is going in, 30%'s got to be taken out of there right away and go into a tax account at least, right? We know that. And then what Russ is saying, what this book is saying is we need to have maybe a separate account or somewhere else where we're putting that 5% off the top so that it's not going into our checking account that's being spent on bills, if that makes sense. So I would say for all of us, we have to have a minimum of 3 checking accounts. You can have an LLC. You don't even have to have an LLC if you don't want to, but an LLC account is your business account. And then take that money out immediately. That especially that tax money, that tax money needs to come off the top regardless. I would say that before the profit, but it's 6 1/2 dozen of the other. And then you can take, Russ says, if you're part of the platform, 5% is coming out automatically. If not, then you can remove your 5%. And if you just, like some things my wife will do, she'll write a check and just stick it in a jar. That way it's out of the account. You know what I'm saying? So whatever it takes, for your system or whatever. But I do believe that we should all, if we all believe we're going to have a big business, then we have to have a big business mindset. And we need to start right now by having those checking accounts. And I know there's fees associated with it. But at the end of the deal, that's immaterial based on the fact that if you're not saving that money and putting it aside, especially come tax time, and you already know all the realtors that have tax issues, right? And these are people that are selling lots and lots of homes. And they're like, what the hell? How do they have tax issues? And we know how it is because they're not good business people.
So as for the fees, Mark, you can absolutely go with a bank like Mike and check out what's going on with that system for doing your banking. By the way, all of it looks like auto links into your QuickBooks as well. So it'll make the data entry that much easier. Or 2, especially for those secondary accounts where it's harder to get the revenue out of, checking in with a local bank or a local credit union. And if they do have a fee, ask them to waive it. Again, right from the content, just because someone, even a business, says that there is a number attached, doesn't mean that that's the accurate number. Heck, how many of you just walk into a dealership and write the check for the sticker? Yeah, y'all negotiate, in that space. Wait, we get to negotiate. Well, It's the same in all spaces. We just get to get out of our head and away from our drunk monkey telling us we're not allowed to ask, and ask. You'll be amazed how many times yes is the answer. What else you guys have?
I'll add what Mark was saying. In the book, I believe it refers to having 5 banks in that same kind of one bank. So then you can separate it right away, and then it doesn't show like the transfer. And then having 2 additional accounts that are not like a credit union that you can't see, and then transfer from those to those, because it takes about a couple of days. So it's really almost like 7 accounts, and it sounds redundant, but it's if it's a system. And again, if we're going to grow to the system, to this level, we want to implement, I feel this important, implement these systems now instead of later. So just want to add that with what Mark was saying.
Yeah, just like when we were talking to Carrie before we got started. And this ties over, Alicia, to you as well, that, hey, even if the revenue's not there right now, we start planning. And the moment the next commission check comes in, we treat it profit first. Now, it may be way extreme on the ratios right now. It might be 1% for profit, 15% to run the business, and 84% to owner's comp right now as the first check. Yet the second check, we can start adjusting those percentages a little better. And as long as we get in this habit, and by the way, that 84% we should take, if you're new, at least 15% and move that off to the tax account. So now we're truly down to a 69% owner's comp. So 4 cuts that way. Okay. 1% profit, 15% taxes, 15% business ops, 69% into our pocket to pay our bills. And as we work on building our Thursday mastermind, because I've had a lot of you say, yes, you want it, I'm going to help you guys with the personal finances as well. And what Marcy and I do to absolutely crush that and keep it thin, so you have more and more to put into investing and growing your financial life. Ryan, you're up. And then Julianne, I saw you were up as well.
Hey, one of the things that I found along the way was going online and searching high rate savings accounts for your tax account. So you don't put, in my opinion, don't put your savings account next to your business checking account. So find a high rate savings account that will work for you. Whether like SoFi has one that was like almost 5%, so those are just some things, like little tricks of the trade as well. So as soon as you get your closing, transfer it to a high rate savings account. So if you pay yourself, if you have an S corp, you pay yourself monthly with payroll taxes, it can come out of that account. Or if you're on an LLC and you're paying yourself monthly or quarterly or yearly taxes, that at least you are accruing better interest than the crappy interest that you will find at most major banking and establishments. So just my 2 cents on that piece.
Well, and most people here, guys, you probably haven't heard of a high yield, high interest savings account. They absolutely exist out there. Ryan's on point. I think they're paying about like 5.5% right now, might be 5% right now. The youngsters know all about this. My daughter's been hammering me to get the high interest savings account set up. And that's a perfect place that I never connected the dots, Ryan, that these dollars, if they were sitting over there, again, it's separate, it's more distant, you don't have easy access to it, and it's making more money. So I think that's freaking brilliant. And I am putting that on my notes to get set up today, as I'm sitting on a bunch of cash elsewhere that's not making the money. Thank you. I'm even going to implement today, Ryan. I know that makes you smile. Julianne, what do you got?
Way to go, Coach. Hey, I just wanted to like I told you, I was having a hard time with this book in the beginning. And I think the very first page on 75, when he talks about belief and the mindset of believing in a system. And when he talks about the woman who had thought somebody said 80% and he said 18% conversion. she was busting her hump doing it, and then was like, felt kind of, I couldn't get that last 5. I'm getting 75% conversion. And he says, he tells us this story because he wants us to believe that when we believe something to be true, that it's a lot easier to achieve and will exceed what's reasonable. And I think it's funny that, you know, like I said, I had a difficult time with the content, but it was like, okay, he buttered me up in the beginning, telling me it's a mindset thing. And even if you know, it's okay. He literally says it's either way, as long as you're actually working the profit first system, you're winning. So even if it gets janky and you don't understand why the system's working, get in there and plug in some numbers and get it working. So, so I really appreciate the author's mindset approach as well.
So for those of you in the room, and I know I've got a visitor in this room as well that didn't read the content, I want to put this in and end today with this mindset piece because it is so true. Years ago, a colleague of mine shared a powerful story about hitting financial targets. She was an up-and-coming motivational speaker, and so she signed up for a speaking boot camp. And during one of the sessions, the instructor explained how to make a back of the room sales presentation from the stage. And when you follow this method, 80% of the audience will buy your product at the end of an event. She took this information, she installed it into her speaking enthusiastically. And initially, she closed only 25% of her audience. Reaching for that 80%, she tweaked and improved her strategy and pitch, constantly reviewing her notes. Over time, her close rate went up 50, 60, and ultimately she was hitting 75%. Yet she never could hit that elusive 80% number. One morning, she sat down to breakfast with a few colleagues, and her old instructor happened to be there. She couldn't wait to speak to him and get direction on how to get that elusive 5%. What was the secret to breaking 80% conversion? When she told her story to the instructor, his jaw dropped. 80%? You thought I said 80%? I said 18. The instructor was teaching 18. She heard 80. That's what she expected. And she got to within 5% of it. If she would have just bought into the 18%, that's where she would have stayed. So part of this is shooting for big goals. Second part of this, man, borrow our beliefs. The people that are here that know that you are $1 million producer masquerading as a $100,000 producer are who you should be listening to, talking to, leaning into, and believing. And we will help you get there.